So with the Bentov experiment, quite some years ago, a bunch of scientists gathered, at a conference, and at the conference, they decided to do an experiment. And in this one room, they had transported 100 grandfather clocks into this room. And as you know, grandfather clocks are, maybe 6 feet tall, thereabouts, and have a, pendulum swinging and are quite ornate and cool in many ways. And they had these grandfather clocks shipped in. They had 100 clocks, and they're all kind of cacophonously creating these ticks and tocks and whatever. And they set up these 100 clocks in a room at this facility that they were at. And then they went to lunch. They all set the clocks at the same time, around 12 noon, or I don't know what the exact time was, but it was somewhere around noon, and they set them all for the exact time. And then they went to lunch, and they went off for a couple of hours to meeting and lunch. And they came back in a couple of hours, and every clock was in sync with every other clock. Every tick was ticking, every tock was tocking, and every pendulum was in sync, moving together. Every pendulum of all 100 clocks were in sync. And so this was, shared with thousands of, people and medical and scientists. And it became known as the Bentov experiment. And it's one of the ways that is shown you could actually say the oneness involved in brainwave entrainment, because all the separate clocks all of a sudden kind of become one when they're in sync with each other and they're entrained. Now, entrainment is similar to synchronicity, but it's not the same. Synchronicity is when we're aligning some energies, and the same energies are moving in the same vibrational pattern. They're in sync with each other. But entrainment is, like I say, it's similar, but it's not the same thing. With entrainment is based primarily upon repetition. And so first, let me just finish commenting about entrainment, and then we'll get into brainwave entrainment. So entrainment, the Bentov experiment, is one example of entrainment. Another example I've shared over the years in my workshops and lectures and presentations around the world, that, and most of you are probably familiar at some point in hearing this story, where they took 6 gals in a college university, and they put these 6 women in the same dormitory. And after 2 months, all 6 women had their menstrual cycles together. And this is another example of entrainment. So entrainment is more about aligning the weaker energies with a stronger energy, and they line up into a kind of a sort of oneness, in the sense that the stronger frequencies predominate over the weaker frequencies, and they kind of sync up and collectively create a certain energy and a certain pattern. Now, that's a second example of entrainment in nature. Actually, I'll mention, just briefly, 1 or 2 more, so you fully kind of see the picture in nature. We've seen from time to time a flock of geese that fly south in the wintertime. And in the old days, many years ago, scientists used to think, well, there was a lead goose that had a higher IQ than the rest of them that was leading the flock of geese south, and then they realized it wasn't about a goose with a higher IQ, it was about entrainment, that all the birds were in a kind of a V formation, and it was just kind of an entrainment phenomena where they just together, entrained and moved through the air and just flew south. It's just another example of entrainment. Another similar example is schools of fish. You could go into a lake or whatever, and maybe there's 100 little fish swimming in a school of fish, and you drop a boulder or a large rock into the water in the middle of the school of fish, and the fish all go in every direction. It breaks up the school of fish, but seconds later, they all converge together, and the school reunites and continues to flow through the water in their direction that they were going. So these are some examples of entrainment in nature. So you may be wondering, so how is this significant to my health? How is this related to sound therapy? Well, I'm about to explain that. So as you can understand by this, you've got energy moving in a particular direction. And so it's a bit more concentrated, and you can see the analogy of oneness. So the definition, as I think Neil mentioned briefly in the introduction, they define, the definition of entrainment is mutual phase locking. Okay, so that understands, if you think about the examples I gave, you can kind of understand mutual phase locking. But without those examples that I mentioned, it doesn't mean much of anything, mutual phase locking. I mean, I don't know anybody that really understands what that term means. That over the years, I've asked people if they knew what mutual phase locking is or entrainment. And in most cases, they didn't know. And lately, the last several years, people are starting to understand a little bit about entrainment and have a general idea of the definition. But I like to clarify it because it's such an important principle to healing and our successful life path. So here we have entrainment is mutual phase locking. So then what is brainwave entrainment? Well, you can just by extension understand that brainwave entrainment is the mutual phase locking of brainwave patterns. Okay, so now you have a little more information instead of just a term like mutual phase locking, which is kind of nebulous. We know that when we have mutual phase locking of brainwave patterns, that's an accurate definition of brainwave entrainment. However, I've found, over the years, people don't really even know what that means. Mutual phase locking of brainwave patterns. I mean, it's an interesting and respectable clinical statement or definition, but what is it and how does it help us? And, how do we use it? So that's what I want to, clarify for you folks here in this, presentation, because, mutual phase locking of brainwave patterns, what is somebody supposed to do with that topic or that information? So when I teach in my workshops and as I travel the world, I started, like I mentioned earlier, the first few years of my work was a real uphill climb. The only clients that I had were seniors that were fed up with allopathic medicine and were looking for some holistic alternatives, and they were smart enough to look beyond the mainstream medical consciousness, so to speak. But it built from there. Eventually I got invited to speak at health and wellness conferences, became a keynote speaker, started traveling. But particularly when I started putting out my recordings, before I put out my book, Sound Medicine, I, being a past singer and songwriter and recording artist, it felt more natural and comfortable to record material and give people exercises and, principles so that they can understand and do this work. And I couldn't find any books that really explained it. In fact, that's one of the reasons I wrote Sound Medicine is, there were some good books out there from some elders in the sound field, like, Don Campbell, Kay Gardner, Jonathan Goldman. These are all friends of mine, people that, I've had on my radio and television show years ago in Los Angeles. I had a radio show for 3.5 years live. And then when I started traveling with sound therapy and workshops, I turned it into a cable television show, which I could pre-record and schedule and then go on the road, and I didn't have to be doing it live. So I did the TV show for 13 years, Heart Touch with Wayne Perry. So I don't know if any of you are familiar with it or in Los Angeles, or, but that was something that I did. And in any event, things changed over the years. And after I started releasing some recordings, the first instructional recording that I released was the ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, and which it definitely is. And it gave exercises like chakra toning, which actually we did last night in my weekly webinar series that I do on Zoom every Saturday night at 7 p.m. In fact, during this pandemic, it's discounted like 56%. And so I'm doing like a 3-hour weekly webinar that you should look into if you're interested in sound therapy, because I've turned my certification training workshop that I do, over a long weekend in Los Angeles into a 10-class webinar workshop series. So they're 3-hour workshops every Saturday at 7 p.m. And you learn all these principles and practices and exercises, many of which are in my book, Sound Medicine, but people like the feedback and like the live, way of getting some coaching and make sure they're doing the exercises right. And so if you sign up for all 10 webinars, you'll get one for free, and as well as a certificate in sound healing. So you might want to look into that. On my website, if you go to the events page at wayneperry.com, it outlines all the 10 classes and the titles and the descriptions of all the classes. And you can sign up for one or two. They're only $33 each, which is a 56% discount off the $75 normal price that I charge for a 3-hour workshop. $75 I've discounted. It's only $33 during the pandemic here. So this is a great time to very economically do this work and learn a lot of important exercises and principles. And so, just like the work that we're doing today in studying brainwave entrainment, it's important. There's a lot of factors to understand in sound therapy, and the most effective sound therapy is using that ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, because you want to eventually shy away from external instruments. There's a lot of people out there, and like I say, call themselves sound healers, but they're not certified. They're not knowledgeable of diagnostic and specific therapeutic sound therapy. And so the important thing that most of them don't understand is that you have to, let's see, click this thing, almost canceled the feed here. Anyway, what they don't understand is if you give somebody a frequency that they have an excess of in their brainwave pattern, it can exacerbate any health issue, physically or emotionally, and things usually start on the emotional level and the emotional part of the brain, and then if they're not addressed and strengthened, then it can lead to the physical level and a weakness and deterioration on the physical level. So that's why it's so vital to do a diagnostic sound analysis, which I actually do by phone now. The first 15 years of my practice, we just did it live in Los Angeles because I didn't trust the technology or the phones, but I eventually found a really good Panasonic phone and a microphone that reproduces the voice perfectly. And so about 12 years ago, I started doing them by phone. And it keeps me pretty busy, especially during this pandemic. I'm doing sound analysis by phone, by Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp for people in Europe, and they're 9 hours ahead of us. So it's like I'm oftentimes doing this around midnight or 1 a.m. My schedule is really crazy being of service to people. And not only that, but in Asia, I go to Taiwan usually every year. This is where I should be now. In the spring, I'm usually in Taiwan, where my book was published in Chinese 2 years ago, Sound Medicine, and it's flying off the shelves. The people there are very, very open-minded and open-hearted and looking for alternatives, living under the oppressive pressure of a communist government. and they're very lovely people, and particularly in Taiwan, which is separate from China, but they're like 13 or 14 hours ahead of us. So when I do sound analysis by phone or Facebook Messenger, there it's like sometimes 3 or 4 in the morning, and then there's Australia and New Zealand. I had some clients and students there, and they're about 15 hours ahead of us. So I never know if I'm sleeping in the daytime or the nighttime. So you never have to worry about calling me. If I'm sleeping, the phone just picks up the message. It doesn't disturb me. So you can call anytime if you have questions or you want to schedule a phone appointment or a sound analysis. My phone number and my email is on my website. A lot of people remove their phone numbers and emails. They don't want to be bothered, but I keep it there because I want to be accessible to people. I try to educate people. I do a lot of free presentations. We have a free open house every month in Los Angeles, which we've had to postpone because of the pandemic, but it's always, going on. I do other, free presentations and to try to educate people, because people don't know that sound therapy, in my experience of doing this for 28 years, it's not only the most effective holistic modality, but it's the least expensive. For all you really need is a, diagnostic sound analysis and a few downloads or CDs so that you can entrain the brainwave pattern. And we're going to continue to talk about the brainwave entrainment, but I want to give you some, foundational information about, me and my work and how I've worked with entrainment and sound therapy for the last 28 years worldwide. And so now that I'm kind of confined to Los Angeles and can't travel to Europe and Asia, where I've done workshop tours and sound healing concert tours as well. I did a sound healing concert tour of Bulgaria 2 or 3 years ago. I also did a sound healing concert and workshop tour in the Midwest in Des Moines, Iowa, Illinois, and Wisconsin few years ago, but now we'll have to see how long this pandemic lasts. But you can reach me by phone or email on my website, wayneperry.com. And I had to take my address off. I did take that off my website because I'd have people coming over here in Los Angeles without an appointment, and it gets to be, cumbersome. But my phone number and email is still there and will continue to be there unless I get overwhelmed with too many marketing calls or some such thing. But I want to be accessible to people that need this work. And in my opinion, everybody needs this work, because I've noticed over the years, I've never seen anybody that's in perfect vibrational balance. Some people have a slight imbalance and some people have a major imbalance, but everybody's kind of out of balance because we're influenced and entrained in our brainwave patterns by so many things in our environment, from the water we drink, to the air we breathe, to the food we eat, to the thoughts we think, to the emotions we feel. And so it's really important to understand these basic principles. They're very easy to understand. And when it gets to brainwave entrainment, I find people understand better and teach more by example, metaphor and example, than just using, clinical terms like mutual phase locking or brainwave patterns. Now, I see there's a question here about, is it the same as critical mass or the 100th monkey theory? No, it's not. Let me explain more in more detail what the brainwave entrainment is about. Again, by example, a very easy example that we can all relate to, I think, is music. Now, I'm not saying that music is the means to healing or the means to entrainment or anything like that. I'm just using it as an example to understand brainwave entrainment. Now, we all remember songs. I'm sure you remember songs from when you were a child, and it's entrained in your brainwave pattern based on the repetition of hearing it. And so, I put this out in my weekend intensive or weekly workshop webinar 2 weeks ago. We did some work with entrainment when we were talking about the ultimate healing instrument, the human voice, and I talked about the entrainment aspects of it, and mentioned think about a song that you remember from your childhood, as far back as you can remember. And I personally, one of the first ones that comes to mind for me was like that old childhood chant, "Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O," and they're using the vowels, E-I-E-I-O, which is very cool when you look at it from a toning perspective or a sound perspective. But that's one. But somebody in the workshop mentioned "Frère Jacques, Frère Jacques, dormez-vous, dormez-vous." So this was a French song originally. And it was interesting that she mentioned it, because I had a client a few days later in Germany. I was doing a diagnostic brain voice sound analysis, which I do regularly, almost every day here by phone. And I had the lady in Germany that, called in on Facebook Messenger. And I was explaining to her about how we're going to entrain brainwave patterns with the frequencies that she's weak in from the diagnostic sound analysis. And we can determine which frequencies are weak and which frequencies are strong and are okay. And so I talked to her, asked her to remember, using the same example, to think about a song that you remember from childhood. And she started singing the same song, Frère Jacques, but she sang it in Germany. So it's interesting how we're all so connected universally. We all have a lot of the same emotional needs and physical needs, and even some of the same experiences. Like it never occurred to me that people in Germany would have some of those same childhood ditties or songs. Like, I didn't ask her about Old MacDonald's farm or anything like that, but she was singing Frère Jacques and in German, which was interesting. So I wonder how many countries, if they do it in Italian in Italy, or Japanese in Japan or something. I mean, who knows? But anyway, the point is that these little songs or chants, or however you want to think of them, stick in the brainwave pattern due to repetition. Hearing them constantly over and over again will invoke a certain entrainment in the brainwave pattern. So this is what we use in sound therapy to put back weak or missing tones into the brainwave pattern that are needed in sound therapy. First, of course, we have to do a diagnostic brain voice sound analysis, which I could briefly explain if you have some questions about that. You're wondering what that is. It's basically, I put people on a microphone, and after doing a little overview of how it works and what I want them to do and not do, and what I'm going to do, and so on and so forth, I put them on the microphone for around 20 minutes or so, and I ask questions that are designed to target different areas of the brain. Some questions are kind of designed for just the baseline questions, like simple things like, what do you do? Where do you live? What do you like? Things like that, just to establish the general pattern of where their octave is and where their general frequencies are. Then we go deeper and then start asking questions that target different parts of the brain, like visual stimuli, how you see shapes, forms, colors. That reveals more of your vibrational pattern in your brainwave spectrum. Then the next questions are about time and space, and thinking about the past or the future. What did you do last week or last month or last year? Or what are you planning to do next week or next month or in 5 years from now? So when you think about the past or the future, that accesses another part of the brain. So each level, we see this much of your vibrational pattern with the first baseline questions. Then we see about this much with the next group of questions visually. And then the time and space questions reveal this much. And then the fourth group of questions pretty much reveal everything, which are more personal questions. And they generally take the longest. We kind of work up to that. And they're a little more personal questions, like how you see yourself, how you see the world, how you view your family or relationships. And it could relate to all the various things in your life: sex, politics, religion, the things that we hold near and dear and that shape our belief systems and personalities and make us different from our neighbors. And so once I get through these, 4 or 5 categories of questions that target different areas of the brain, it reveals through your voice your vibrational pattern, because if it's in your brain, it's in your voice. If it's dormant, if it's missing or dormant in your brainwave pattern, it will also be missing or dormant in your voice. So it's a very accurate methodology of understanding and identifying the frequencies that are present in your brainwave pattern and the ones that aren't present. And another important part of it is it reveals frequencies that are excessive. And this is just as important as the weak frequencies. Some people that start to get into sound therapy before they go deep enough or before they're certified, they think it's just a weak frequency and you can just entrain a weak frequency and that's all there is to it. But it's more than that. Yes, we're going to explain exactly, how to do brainwave entrainment of frequencies in a few minutes. But it's also dealing with the excess frequencies, because there's 3 conditions presently in your brainwave pattern that I see when I put somebody on a microphone. The microphone's plugged into an orchestral tuner, not a sound machine. I don't use sound machines anymore. I haven't used them in 27 years. And so I'm using an orchestral tuner, which is very unique, and tuner that gives a digital readout not only of the octave, but of the specific note frequencies. And that's why I was mentioning earlier, we have to call those frequencies something. And so since we have a pre-existing musical system that's actually a perfect mathematical formula, what better thing to use than that? We're not using music therapy, but we use the identification of the frequencies via the notes. So if something's vibrating at around 16 cycles per second, it would put it in the lower octaves of the note of C. And if it's vibrating at higher octaves of C, it could be vibrating at 156 cycles per second, or whatever. Every cycle per second will relate to a particular note frequency, because the notes are derived by the number of cycles per second that they vibrate at. Like we talk about A440, the note of A in the octave of middle C vibrates 440 times per second. And that's been our standard tuning in music for many years. And now there's a lot of controversy about various tunings that they're discovering. And the 432 tuning seems to be a more accurate tuning and make a lot more sense to a lot of people. I think it is a better tuning. However, there's not enough evidence to indicate that the importance of a difference in tuning, because most people aren't going to hear a difference between 432 and 440. It's so microscopic, the difference, that people aren't going to notice it. So then the question is, can it have a varied effect, a different effect on the brain? Well, I haven't seen any evidence to show it has much of an effect, but I can relate to some of the principles behind the 432 frequency. So what I do is I give people the choice. In my orchestral tuner, I can set it for 440 tuning, 432 tuning, or even 528 tuning, whatever tuning you want. I'm happy to set the tuner for if that satisfies you or makes more sense to you. My use of sound therapy, it really doesn't make much of a difference, because what we want to identify is what frequencies are weak and dormant in the brainwave pattern. That has nothing much to do with the tuning of musical notes and musical instruments. And so when we identify that let me back up. And as I mentioned earlier, there's 3 things that we see in the sound analysis when I'm looking at my orchestral tuner and looking at the data that it reveals in terms of the octave. I mean, I can pretty much tell the octave of a person's voice just by hearing them speak. I've been doing this for so many years. I don't even need the tuner to determine the octave. I know that women are generally about an octave higher in their voice than men. So on my chart that I designed many years ago, the multi-octave sound and voice chart, I have different columns that for the note frequencies and different columns for the octaves. And women are generally in the 3rd octave and middle C, and men are generally in the 2nd octave. but some people have split octaves. So, you know, everybody's unique and different. And no two people are alike with their, you know, their readout and their personalized sound chart. I've even done identical twins, ladies out in, I think it's around Cincinnati or someplace some years ago. And they had similar patterns, but they were different. They were uniquely different. So I've noticed this among twins, among family members. Family members oftentimes have similar frequency patterns, but they're still uniquely different. No two people are alike. It's kind of, you could say, like a sonic fingerprint, if you will. So we use this to, again, finish up about those three frequencies that you keep wondering. I keep digressing, but forgive me, please. I kind of share these things in kind of a stream of consciousness as spirit moves me and gives me information to give to you. And so the three things that we see in the sound analysis is, the first one are frequencies that are healthy and that are there as they should be, and that are showing up in your brainwave pattern as well as in your voice. And so we don't need to tend to those because they're coming through, they're resonating fine. But it's the other two categories that are concerning. The first one, as I mentioned, are weak frequencies that are weak or dormant in the brainwave pattern. So that's the first thing I'm looking at and taking note of in your sound chart. And then the second thing that I'm looking for is excess frequencies, as I alluded to earlier. If you have excess frequencies, that can cause the same problems physically and emotionally as weak frequencies, because they're not generating enough energy, or they're generating too much energy.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Neil with Portal to Ascension, and I just wanted to take a moment really quick and show you the Portal to Ascension platform. The presentation or the documentary that you just watched was one of our many productions that I've done over the years, created well over 1,000 workshops, events, conferences, retreats, webinars, and this is how our website works. If you want to go ahead and receive not only access to this presentation, but hundreds of other presentations that we have available for you right now for free. You can go to our website, you enter your name right here, you email right here, click sign up. Pretty soon we're going to be launching a new website, but the procedure is pretty much the same. You know, your name, email, sign up. Once you do that, you're going to get an email with your username and a temporary password. You then click login. Once you log in, you're going to see the whole entire backend laid out with all the webinars and presentations for you. Not only can you start typing by speaker name, topic, category, whatever you want, even letter, but you can scroll down this list here and sort by category. And I'm not going to read these off to you, but you can take a look. We have a lot of different topics: UFO disclosure, true world history, spiritual development, science, sacred geometry, and so much more. And then you can also search by speaker, which we have here alphabetically, or you can just browse the whole entire thing here and take a look at all these presentations. You are able to, if you can take a look up the top corner here, you're able to add to your watch list to watch these back anytime you want. So you can add to your watch list, it'll be put there. When you come back into the platform, you can continue watching where you left off. There's a documentaries tab, there's an interviews tab, and this is how the individual event page will look. So right now, you can go to the website, portaltoascension.org, put in your name and email, sign up, you'll get access to what you just watched, and there's so much more footage. There's free footage being added weekly. So really, this is a one-stop shop for consciousness, and there's always new valid content for you that is relevant for the times that we're currently in, where we're not only dissecting and delving deep into the ancient past, but also creating information that will empower us for the future to come. And here is an example of one of the event pages. This one's on Billy Carson, Quantum Macabre and Manifestation. You can view it right there, description, speaker image, that will also go to his bio, and then also suggested webinars that you can tune into as well. And then, of course, please do leave a comment and leave us feedback. So there you go, guys. That's our back end, and that's how Portal to Ascension works. Go ahead, go to the website right now, portaltoascension.org. Enter your name, email, sign up, take a look at the site, let us know what you think, and enjoy.